Men often find themselves blindsided by a culture that hates authentic masculinity, and many have given in and succumbed to the ever-evolving culture and woke society. But not us. We are the ReMENant, faithful Catholic men from 3 different generations who reach through the radio to tackle current events that challenge our wills and empower the practice of the Catholic faith through thought-provoking discernment and prayer. So, if you're feeling overwhelmed and bombarded, it's time to turn your radio up and join us for The ReMENant on the Carolina Catholic Radio Network.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to The ReMENant. I'm Bill Snyder. It's great to be with you here this evening, and tonight we're going to be talking about Advent because we're in the middle of the Advent season, this beautiful, penitential, and joyous season of Advent that we find ourselves in. We'll be talking about that tonight. As always, I'm joined by my good friends Ray Haywood and Stephen Thomas. But before we bring them on, and I want to remind you that the ReMENant show is sponsored by the Fraternity of St. Joseph Men's Group. You can visit fsjjourneyman.com to review the easy-to-follow resource documents and consider starting a chapter of the FSJ Men's Group in your own parish today. But Ray, Stephen, how are you tonight?
I'm doing awesome, man. This is just such an exciting liturgical season right now.
It is.
It's just great.
It is. It's a lot of fun.
As always, I'm looking forward to this time in fellowship.
Of course. And so am I. I want to start tonight's show with a little bit of reflection from a devotional that I authored a few years ago called A Contemplative Las Posadas. Just to give you a little bit of context, I authored this devotional based on a traditional Mexican devotion of the Posadas, and it's a reenactment of the journey from Nazareth to Bethlehem of the Blessed Mother and St. Joseph. And what happens is in many Mexican and Latin American countries is they groups of people travel from house to house to house seeking lodging, and they sing a song that is a traditional Posada song asking for lodging, and they get rejected and they get rejected and they get rejected, and finally a reluctant innkeeper allows them in. And so it's a 9-night novena that lasts from December 16th all the way to December 24th. And it's a pretty cool thing. And what I did was I took the song and I broke it down into reflections on the different themes within that song. And I'm not going to sing or read you the song. You definitely don't want me to sing it. And it's a little too long to read, but you can Google traditional Posada song. You can do that and you'll be able to see the lyrics. I want to focus, though, on one of the reflections that I wrote in this radio show called The Gift of Acceptance. And this particular season really is about acceptance and accepting one another. We need to accept Christ. Christ comes and he asks us, to accept him. And what does he come as? He comes as an infant, right? And there's so many different players in this story. I want you to just take you into ancient Bethlehem for a minute and paint this picture for you. Here were all these people traveling for a census, right? Scripture says in the Gospel of Luke that all went to be enrolled in each in their own town. This meant that every single Roman citizen had to return to their birthplace and give their name to be counted for taxation and other government purposes. Cities and towns were overwhelmed with people preparing for another government intrusion. Think about our modern times and think about where we are today. A lot of government intrusion, at least in my opinion. And so here we have something in similarity with these ancient times. But it's not hard to imagine that all of these innkeepers would be overwhelmingly, overwhelmed with this demand for lodging, right? And limited supply, they had to decide who they were going to accept and who they weren't, right? If you had rooms, the good guests were going to be getting the rooms, not the guys who were, off the wall drunks and crazies that were going to ruin the place, right? And there weren't like any anti-discrimination laws in ancient Bethlehem. This isn't modern America, right? So here we are, finding ourselves realizing that Jewish laws actually encourage discrimination. One of those things that they encourage discrimination over was leprosy and childbirth. If you were a leper, you had to cover your mouth and scream, I am unclean, and dwell in solitude outside of the town until the leprosy cleared up, which was basically never, right? Leprosy never cleared up. It just killed you. And second on the list was childbirth. It made you unclean. You can look it up. It's in Leviticus chapter 12, verses 1-8. I encourage you to read that. You'll see it. But here's what it says about childbirth and the woman who gives childbirth. Everything on which she lies during her impurity shall be unclean. Everything upon which she sits shall be unclean. And whomever touches her bed shall wash his clothes, bathe in water, and be unclean until evening. Now, if you were an innkeeper and you saw a poor pregnant woman riding on a donkey with a carpenter, do you think you'd be giving this pregnant woman a room to stay in? No, right? They'd be sleeping in a stable, which is exactly what happened. They were treated worse than lepers. They were treated like animals here, right? And you have to understand that this is where society was when Jesus came into it. He didn't come into an organized, perfect society. He came into a chaotic, wild place, seeking acceptance, though, right? He was seeking acceptance. And so, guys, I wonder if you have any insights on, how Christ seeks acceptance, even amidst all the chaos, because we've got a lot of chaos going on in our world right now. So, any insight into, how Christ is asking us to accept him amidst all the chaos and what's going on in our culture?
Oh man, there's such a richness to this that can be unwound. So, a couple of things that came to mind while you were telling us that the story, especially about Leviticus, is just the how much of a rich symbolism there is in all of these Old Testament rules, if you will. There's a whole lot of emphasis on being ritually unclean. And it kept making me think of how there's such a parallel between the Old Testament and the law there and the Old Covenant there and the New Testament. And in particular, a couple of thoughts were just how perfectly it all lines up in salvation history. Jesus was, Joseph and Mary took Jesus to Bethlehem to fulfill a prophecy. He ended up being born in Bethlehem. So he's carried in utero to fulfill a prophecy. And then Joseph happened to be in the line of David's ancestry. So through his foster father, Jesus fulfills another prophecy, being in the line of David. And I think that it's such a celebration of humility, and to kind of take it back to Christ, that God is born into what would have been perceived as really the backwater of the world, because the center of the world at the time was Rome. Now, Jesus was born into a period of history where Rome was the dominant power, and indeed, Rome was almost at its height at that time. And Judea would have been kind of seen as, from Rome's perspective, as kind of almost like an annoying grandchild. It was one of the most unruly of the provinces, and in fact, they had, I think, at least two subsequent rebellions, and what was it in, I think, AD 70, so really early into the first few decades of Christianity, where the Romans actually, I think, razed the temple and destroy it after a Jewish revolt. So that's what I think I have to say about it. Ray, what do you think?
So first, I'd like to say that this the Contemplative Las Posadas that Bill wrote, he sent it to me last year at Advent. Just beautiful. So I want to say that the way that it's written, and you could reach out to us, and Bill can send you some of these if you wanted to do it as a group. Take advantage of what's shared here because it's rich. But as I read the fifth day of this, the gift of acceptance, I see just how, I didn't understand that, it was during a census, or, that it was all of this traveling and there wasn't room at the end. It may not have even been that there wasn't room at the end. It may have been that they were turned away. So this is a small, like a pamphlet size. It's not really a book. It's a small contemplative. It's just beautiful. And it gives you clear context of what that moment in time looked like. Now, speaking on that moment in time, we have to understand that we are all placed into our moments divinely. And through divine providence, I could see 54 years old, looking back, I see so many things that happened in my life that I was placed, it measured out proper doses. I always go back to that. So, divine providence places Mary, Joseph, and Jesus where they are at that moment. And Jesus is out in a manger, which is a feeding trough. And what has he become to us? The body and blood that we are nurtured through. So when you think of how I believe that I am perfectly placed in time, I know that Jesus Christ was perfectly placed in time to become the nurturing, just the bread of life. And, divine providence shares that with us so beautifully. And Bill, I want to say you did a great job on this. I mean, this has to be. Can you put this into the store, into our description of this show, so people can see this?
Oh yeah, I can do that, and yeah, definitely, I can do that.
One other thing that I thought, as Ray was talking about being placed in providence, is how this just shows that God's foolishness is human wisdom, and that we have such a difficult time of understanding God sometimes. God chose to incarnate himself, to become a human being in such a humble way. Like we would think, who did they think was a god at the time? Well, the Roman emperors thought that they were gods. That was what they thought. People at the top of society were the gods, and that was a long practice that they had. Now that's the human thinking. We would think, if God was incarnate, he'd probably be the emperor. That makes sense on a human level, but God doesn't work within a human framework. He transcends that, and that is such a divine mystery to us that we're given, and we're called to get right into that and contemplate it and make ourselves more like God, and get out of that human rut, so to speak, of our thinking, because it leads us to nowhere unless we open ourselves up to God.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's beautiful too, to recognize and see that we've got to open ourselves up to God. We got to open ourselves up to who he is. And again, he's going to come, like he's going to come again, right? I mean, that's what we believe as Catholics too. And Advent, a lot of these readings are eschatological in nature. When you look at the season of Advent, because of that, right? Like we recognize that this is not his only coming. We celebrate this humble coming, but he's going to come again, and our heart's going to be open, right? He prefers to dwell in your heart over a stable. So choose to allow him this season of Advent to dwell in your heart. We have to take a short break here on the Remnant, but when we come back, we're going to be talking with you about our saint of the week, which is John the Baptist. Or what a better saint. There's really no better saint than John the Baptist for Advent. But we will be right back after these messages here on the Carolina Catholic Radio Network.
Hello, my name is Ray Haywood, and I'm coming to you today to talk to you about the book that I wrote, Tools to Ready the Journey, A Father's Guide to a Faith-Filled Family. This book can be purchased anywhere, but you could also go to the website of trjfathersguide.com, where you will gain access to the resource documents, the chapter podcasts, as well as the social media platform links of Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. This book has two audiences. The first audience is for the younger man. That's the title of the book, Tools to Ready the Journey. The second audience is for the older man. The subtitle of the book, A Father's Guide to a Faith-Filled Family. That's for us to find value in the tools and awarenesses that are shared and hand them on to that next generation of leading men. As men, we need to understand that we cannot do this journey alone. I hope that this scratches at you an awareness and ignites your heart to visit that website of trjfathersguide.com.
Are you looking for a way to deepen your prayer life and faith this Advent season? A Contemplative Las Posadas by Bill Snyder is a novena that offers reflections based on the traditional Mexican devotion that reenacts the journey of Saint Joseph and the Blessed Virgin Mary from Nazareth to Bethlehem. The ecclesiastically approved devotional is available for purchase for only $4.99 on our website, patchworkheart.org, or emailing info@patchworkheart.org. Welcome back to The Remnant on the Carolina Catholic Radio Network.
Welcome back to the Remnant. So this week the saint is Saint John the Baptist. And, whenever I think of John the Baptist, I always think of prepare ye the way of the Lord. And when I was a kid, my mother, she used to clean the house to the soundtrack of Godspell. And I could hear in my mind right now, whenever I think, I'm telling you, I'm going to sing it a little. So you may want to move back from the. You ready? Here we go. This is going to be pretty bad. You ready? Prepare ye the way of the Lord. I'm telling you, my mother would have the music blasting, the windows were open, and she'd be cleaning the house to that, or to, Jesus Christ Superstar, all these things that some conservative Catholics would think is very too much Protestant. But, when you grow up with it, it's woven into your heart, especially when your mom sings it, So, yes, John the Baptist, prepare ye the way of the Lord. Isn't it beautiful? So he was very popular because people could understand his simple messaging. And, that messaging was repent, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. I baptize you with water for repentance, but he who is coming is mightier than I. He will baptize you with the Holy Spirit and with fire. Like this was the messaging, so simple. When Jesus came, his messaging, we had to actually start to scratch past the surface of it. Was, we're going to get a little further with that. But so as Catholics, we tend to underestimate his significance in first century Jewish context. I mean, if you think about it, so think about this. He was the last prophet of the Old Testament. He held a place of honor as he was recognized as a prophet, and it had been centuries since the time of Daniel and Ezekiel, who were the last prophets. This is pretty wild stuff. The way that Bill so beautifully painted the picture of context in his Contemplative, so that we understood that the census was going on, and we started to get the background of the innkeepers and the unclean and all of these different things that were going on in those moments, and then we don't put value in the messaging. So it's just beautiful. I may sing again later on when I do my ReMENant, so get ready. But all I can think about when I think of John the Baptist is this poor guy was eating locusts.
Yeah, so I will say, I think Godspell is, still probably better than most of the rap that we hear nowadays. So
it's not very much.
I think we've had a retrogression. But so John the Baptist, I think underappreciated. This guy, he had a great deal to bring to the table, and like Ray was saying, there's a great deal of contextualization needed. So for a first century Abrahamic Jew, it would have meant a great deal to proclaim the Messiah. Like, okay, like that is that's a big deal, a big risk too. So we as 21st century Christians, we take it for granted. Yeah, that happened. Okay, historical fact. Next. Jews were versed in our Old Testament. That they knew its deep symbolisms and signs, and they would have heard John the Baptist and seen all of these cultural references that they would just instantly get. We call those mores in philosophy. Modern Westerners don't possess that to such a great degree. I think particularly as Catholics, we kind of have a hobbled leg on our stool, so to speak, when it comes to understanding that. And John went around claiming that these prophecies would have been fulfilled imminently. So I'm currently reading a Advent reflection book from Word on Fire with Bishop Barron, and John himself is one of these signs, which is kind of funny. It's getting really meta. I love it. So it has a passage here from the book of Isaiah. Quote, "A voice of one crying out in the desert, prepare ye the way of the Lord, make straight his paths. Every valley shall be filled, and every mountain and hill shall be made low. The winding roads shall be made straight, and the rough ways made smooth. And all flesh shall see the salvation of God." Close quote. So John is taking a huge risk. But as it is written in John chapter 1, verses 6 through 8, there was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light, so that through him all might believe. He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light. Now, this is spontaneous, but interesting to use the word witness. I don't know if the original gospel was written in Greek, but our modern word martyr comes from the Greek word for witness. And I wonder if that was intentional on behalf of the author, because on behalf of the scriptural author, because if we look deeper into what happened to John, he eventually lost his head for what happened. Bill, what are your thoughts?
Perfect. I love you actually referred to the reading from last Sunday, right? I love that. That you talked about that. And I like, especially in that reading, how there is this leveling, right, of the field, right, where the mountains are made low and the rivers are made equal, right? Like the valleys are brought up. And I was at mass this last Sunday with our pastor, and I was listening to him during his homily, and he's talking about this justice, right? And that Christ comes to level the playing field, right? We kind of alluded to some of that, or you did actually, Stephen. In the first half of the program, you talked about high and mighty people. They thought they were gods. Well, Jesus came to kind of level that and raise up the lowly. And John the Baptist this is what he's doing. He's preaching this. I also in John the Baptist see somebody who would go about this in a natural way. John the Baptist certainly wasn't a flashy guy. Did he stand out from society? Yes, he did. He was, as Ray said, he's eating locusts, wild honey. Like, I don't think, women really wanted to be associated with that, hang out with somebody like that, that smelled like that. But the reality is that I think he went about this in a natural way. I was reflecting actually on Amos, the prophet Amos, and looking it up in my Bible as you were talking about justice rolling down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. That's Amos chapter 5, verse 24. But let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. And you sit there and look at what John the Baptist did, and he was, as the Baptist, using water to just do that, right? Bring about justice, begin to level the playing field, prepare the way for Jesus to come in and do that. And when you think about rain, rolling down a mountainside, here's what it does. It erodes that mountain. It lowers the mountain. And what does it do? It fills the valley. So when you think about that, you think about the imagery of that, just how water can just do that. And John the Baptist was clearly using water to begin that process of leveling the playing field. So that's what I think about there. And if you don't mind, I'll roll right into my ReMENant challenge with that. And what I think about with the ReMENant challenge this week, and especially John the Baptist, and especially what we're looking at from the standpoint of justice and acceptance. There's a lot of marginalized people in the world out there. I was reading something on Facebook earlier that said, how about that homeless guy that's standing there looking really cold? The next time you want to pass him up, would you pass up a dog that's like that? There's a lot of injustice in the world, especially this time of year. So pick one injustice that you see this week. It could be a homeless person. It could be a friend who's really down and out. Something on social media that needs to be addressed, needs to be called out. Somebody's acting just real stupid on Facebook or Twitter or something, and level the playing field. Step in there, be like John the Baptist, and gently go about doing that. So, Stephen, Ray, what are your thoughts?
Oh, that's just great stuff. So kind of getting to that same spirit of stepping out of that normal, what have you, sort of a commuter days, so to speak. You're just in your narrow world. I want you to pick up an Advent reflection book, either at a bookstore or sign up for a reflections newsletter to be sent to your email inbox. Some that I would recommend. There are lots of different apostolates which you can choose from, which can be integrated into a busy lifestyle. That's my challenge for you. I'm sure Ray's got one for you. That's great too.
Yes, absolutely. So it's a great show, no? We're even starting to sing on this show now. A poor attempt, but still an attempt. Right? So my ReMENant challenge goes out to all men, especially fathers, that we should follow in John the Baptist's lead of simple messaging, and we need to realize that we can't do this journey alone. And we have to start to give freely of ourselves and not from the surplus. It's been said by by Mother Teresa, and don't quote me exactly, but it goes something like this. If it doesn't hurt, you haven't given anything at all. So, time, treasure, talent, it's not just money. I mean, for us to give time is harder than to give money sometimes for a lot of us. We're so busy, watching reels on Facebook. But, so I go back and I think of this story of, we can't do this alone. We talk about uncling and, I want you to know my sons, they need other men in the community to see good role models. There's only so much I can do for my sons. But, I think of that passage where the friends brought the cripple and cut the hole in the roof. Think about that. Think of the faith that they had. Think of how elated they were. You think they were giving high fives and smacking each other on the arm as they were walking away with their friend they had to lower in the roof? Yeah. We need to do that. Yeah. We need to actually step close to each other, and recognize this type of, band of brothers that we need to build, and to recognize that the only way we truly share in joy is through unconditional love. There's no way that we could share in joy except through love. So, Bill, you want to close us out, my brother?
Sure.
I didn't sing. I kept it to myself.
Thank you for saving the Broadway tunes for the next episode, Ray. But we do appreciate you all listening here on The Remnant. And until next time, from all of us, may God bless you and your families, especially during this Advent season. And reach out to us at theremnantshow@gmail.com.
Thank you for joining The Remnant today. For more information about us, email theremnantshow@gmail.com. That's the ReMenant show@gmail.com.